Imagine finding a human body beneath the ground. Someone deliberately put it there. Someone dug that hole by hand. Someone carried the body into it. Then someone covered it with earth. That simple act is surprisingly ancient. Humans have buried their dead for thousands of generations, but nobody knows exactly where the tradition began. The oldest evidence is far older than civilization. It predates farming, writing, cities, and kings. It even predates our species in some cases. Neanderthals appear to have buried some of their dead. Early Homo sapiens did something similar. But why? Was burial practical? Was it emotional? Or did humans suddenly develop ideas about death? The answer is probably stranger than any single explanation. Because a grave is more than a hole. It is a message about the dead. It is also a message from the living. And that message begins with something extremely practical. A dead body changes quickly. Bacteria begin breaking its tissues apart. Insects arrive. Scavengers follow. The smell spreads through the surrounding environment. Leaving bodies exposed could attract dangerous animals. Burial could reduce some of those problems. But that explanation has a serious weakness. Animals also avoid dangerous smells. Animals also move away from contaminated areas. Yet animals do not build cemeteries. They do not arrange bones beneath stones. They do not repeatedly return to graves. Humans do something fundamentally different. We turn death into a place. And that changes everything. Consider one of the oldest famous examples. Shanidar Cave sits in northern Iraq. Archaeologist Ralph Solecki excavated it during the 20th century. He discovered several Neanderthal remains there. One individual became especially famous. Shanidar 1 had survived severe injuries. His body showed evidence of long-term disability. He may have needed assistance to survive. Someone probably helped him for years. Then he died inside the cave. His remains were eventually found beneath sediment. That raised an unsettling possibility. Perhaps Neanderthals cared deeply for their dead. Perhaps they cared deeply for each other. But archaeology rarely gives us simple answers. Sediment can move after bodies are buried. Animals can disturb bones. Water can move objects underground. Flowers can also create misleading evidence. Solecki famously proposed pollen evidence at Shanidar. He suggested flowers might have been placed there. That idea became enormously influential. Later researchers questioned whether the pollen came from flowers. Burrowing rodents can move pollen underground, so the flower story remains debated. But the grave itself remains important. Someone had to explain why those bones were there, and Shanidar was not an isolated discovery. Other Neanderthal sites show possible deliberate burials. La Chapelle Auxiliaire is one famous example. It was excavated in France in 1908. Researchers found a Neanderthal skeleton there. The body appeared unusually complete. The surrounding sediment suggested intentional placement. Later interpretations have remained controversial. Archaeologists continue debating the evidence. That uncertainty actually tells us something important. Ancient graves are extremely difficult to recognize. Soil changes. Bones move. Landscapes disappear. Thousands of years erase human intentions. Yet some graves survive almost like time capsules. One extraordinary example comes from Israel. At Qafzeh Cave, researchers found early Homo sapiens remains. Some burials date to roughly 100,000 years ago. Several individuals appear deliberately buried. One grave contained red ochre near the body. Ochre is a naturally occurring mineral pigment. Humans used it long before recorded history. But why place pigment beside the dead? That is where burial becomes more mysterious. Ochre can color bodies, objects, and surfaces. It may have carried symbolic meaning. It may also have served practical purpose. We cannot simply read ancient intentions from modern minds. But repeated behavior matters. Repetition suggests something more than accident. And burial appears repeatedly across ancient sites. At Skhul Cave, researchers found additional early human burials. Some date to roughly the same broad period. Together, these sites show something remarkable. Humans were already treating corpses differently. They were not simply leaving every body where it fell. But burial did not look the same everywhere. Some bodies were flexed. Some were extended. Some were surrounded by objects. Some were placed in caves. Others were buried outdoors. Some graves contained pigments. Others contained almost nothing. Why would people make these choices? Perhaps there was never one reason. Death creates several problems simultaneously. There is the practical problem of decay. There is the emotional problem of losing someone. There is the social problem of explaining their absence. There is also the terrifying problem of mortality. A grave can address all four. It removes a body from immediate view. It creates a location connected to that person. It gives survivors somewhere to return. And it makes an invisible absence visible. But there is another possibility. Burial may have helped humans manage memory. A grave preserves a person's place in the landscape. The dead become connected to specific ground. That changes how groups experience time. An ancestor can become part of a community's story. The landscape itself can become historical. A hill becomes someone's resting place. A cave becomes a place of ancestors. A patch of earth becomes emotionally important. Suddenly geography contains memory. And humans are unusually good at doing this. We attach memories to places constantly. Modern cities are filled with memorials. Ancient landscapes were too. The difference was simply the technology available. There is another clue hidden inside graves. Sometimes people buried objects with the dead. Archaeologists call these grave goods. They can include tools, ornaments, pigments, or weapons. Their meaning is difficult to reconstruct. A useful object might reflect practical beliefs. A decorative object might signal identity. A valuable object might express status. Or the object might have symbolic meaning. The dead cannot explain their possessions. So archaeologists must interpret patterns carefully. One famous later example comes from Sungir. Sungir is an Upper Paleolithic site in Russia. Researchers discovered remarkably elaborate burials there. Beads covered the clothing of some individuals. Thousands of tiny beads had been placed around them. Ivory objects were also present. Burials suggest enormous investment of labor. That investment matters. Somebody spent time preparing those graves. Somebody gathered materials. Somebody made objects. Somebody organized the burial. Someone cared enough to spend scarce resources. Why spend energy on someone who could not repay you? Because humans do not treat relationships as purely practical. Emotional bonds survive physical absence. Burial may be one expression of that strange ability. But there is an even deeper possibility. Graves may help societies control uncertainty. Death creates questions with no easy answers. Where did the person go? Why did they die? Can they still influence the living? Will we ever see them again? A burial cannot answer those questions scientifically. But it can create a ritual response. Ritual gives uncertainty a structure. Everyone knows what happens next. The body is prepared. The grave is made. Objects may be placed beside it. Earth covers the body. The community remembers. The chaos receives an order. And humans are extraordinary pattern makers. We create rituals whenever uncertainty becomes overwhelming. That may be part of why burial endured. But there is something else graves reveal. They show that humans understand absence. A dead person is physically present. Yet socially, they are suddenly gone. That contradiction is uniquely painful. The body remains recognizable. The person does not respond. Their voice is gone. Their intentions are gone. Their future is gone. Burial gives survivors a physical boundary. Here is the body. Here is the ground. Here is where we say goodbye. Perhaps that boundary mattered enormously. Modern neuroscience also gives us a clue. Humans construct powerful models of other people's minds. We constantly predict what others think and feel. Death suddenly breaks those predictions. The person stops generating new behavior. Yet our internal model of them remains. We can still imagine their voice. We can still remember their reactions. We can still predict what they might have said. The brain continues representing someone who is absent. A grave externalizes that internal representation. It gives memory a physical anchor. This may explain why people revisit graves. They are not simply visiting bones. They are visiting a relationship. And that relationship can outlive the body. So did humans invent graves because corpses smelled? Probably sometimes. Did humans bury people because they loved them? Almost certainly sometimes. Did burial reflect beliefs about an afterlife? In some cultures, probably. But the earliest graves may have had simpler beginnings. A body needed moving. Someone cared enough to move it. Then the action became repeated. Repeated actions became traditions. Traditions became rituals. Rituals became symbols. Symbols became stories about death itself. And eventually, humans built entire cultures around burial. Cemeteries became landscapes of collective memory. Tombs became monuments. Monuments became statements about power and identity. But the first grave may have been much smaller. Perhaps it was simply one person digging. Perhaps they were standing beside someone they loved. Perhaps they did not understand death completely. They only understood that someone was gone. So they placed that person beneath the earth. Then they covered them carefully. And humanity began turning death into memory.